Okay, next up is Russell Scibetti, who has done a lot, not only with the New York Jets, but now with Core Software on data analytics. And his big thing is to make sure that every ticket rep and every person that deals with data analytics does not get really confounded by it, nor feel that it's against them. So without further ado, Russell.
Awesome. Okay. Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? Great. While they're pulling up the slides, I'll give you my 30-second background. So yeah, I am with Core Software. I run our product strategy. We do CRM solutions for teams and leagues and media companies. Before that, I spent 5 years with the New York Jets as director of CRM and database marketing, using all different tools, CRM, all different analytics for the business side. Before that, the Flyers. Before that, Arizona State. So yes, as mentioned, today I'm going to be talking a bit about sales and data. And sometimes I feel like culturally or philosophically, organizationally, they don't always agree with each other. Sometimes you have a mentality from one department that has their way of doing things. It could be managers, it could be down at the sales level. But sometimes you end up with option one, where you've got, I have my way of doing things. I know what it takes to close a sale. I don't need no stinking data. Just let me get on the phones, let me get out there and do my thing. And then you've got, no, I have exactly figured out the regression model to predict exactly what percentage of what time is going to buy what product, so follow my model. And those are kind of, now I'm exaggerating for extremes here. But the truth is that they do sometimes have these philosophical disagreements. But the truth is, if we actually take a step back and look at it as, instead of looking at it as sales responsibility and the data analytics responsibility, and kind of look at it very holistically, you should see, and the nice thing is hopefully you have seen from most of the presentations and topics that have come up today, we are all supporting the same cause, which is good for me. I feel like personally I would have failed as a sales rep. That's not my strong suit. I'm a data guy, I'm analytics, but one of the things first thing I did whenever someone came in for sales training in an organization, it wasn't just, this is how you use a system, this is what the data means, this is what you have to do. It was, my old teacher used to like saying WIFI, what's in it for you? And I'd always tell them, like, these tools are here to make you better. Every time I can help you close 1 extra sale or 5 extra sales, I'm doing my job. So if I'm doing my job well and you're doing your job well, we should all do well. So, like I said, some organizations don't always see it this way. So Team X, which I will not name Team X, essentially had some portion of their sales team that was a little tired of all the data-centric thinking and said, listen, we're the best sellers. We know what we're doing. Let us just kind of go through the database. We'll pick out the people we want to sell to, and let us close them. And the person in charge, being the very analytical thinker that he was, said, let's just do this as an experiment. Half the team was able to prospect the database as much as they want, and the other half, this person proactively distributed the leads to them. Just trust what I give you. What happened? Team B crushed Team A. And it's not that Team A was bad. It's not like their numbers were, poorer than normal. It's just it wasn't their skill set. Or they were spending too much time trying to sift through volumes of data to try to figure out which data is going to be most relevant for which audience, when one person with the right skill set can do that across for the entire team and save everyone a lot of time. All right. So I kind of look at this, like I said, very holistically. There's this cycle between sales and data where everything is very nurturing, very supportive. So it all starts off at the top with data collection. And we're going to go through on the next slide all the different types of data. Once you collect the data, someone's job is to analyze it. That might not be the sales team directly, or depending on the organization, depending how lean you are, sometimes you do have a little bit of that responsibility. You have to kind of look at the information being presented to you and do a little bit of maybe not very complex, but at least some basic interpretation of information. Then you execute. That execution could be an email campaign for the marketers, it could be a sales call, it could be a retention call, and then ultimately that leads to results. Those results should then be measured and analyzed, and the feedback, and I really want to emphasize, feedback helps determine, do we need additional data? Should we go out and collect different things? What's working, what's not, and how do we adjust? That feedback is very important that it also comes directly from the sales team. I am a huge, huge believer in the value of staff-generated data. The example I used to use from the Jets is we had one question that our sales reps were supposed to answer during the first 2 weeks, actually during the entire renewal campaign, but it was make your assessment. How likely is this person to renew on a scale of 1 to 5? Super simple question. You didn't have to actually ask the person that question. You just had to enter it into the system. But what it let me do was look back and see how we entered those numbers in the past and what those numbers ended up being when they finished renewing. And so within a week or two into our renewal cycle, from one data point, I could immediately predict within 3 percentage points what our renewal was going to be during that season. So it's not just big data. It's not just what the models behind the scenes. A lot of it comes directly from the sales team and the service team, people interacting with the customers. So what are these different types of data? We started talking into them a little bit. The first part, transacted data. That's pretty straightforward. It's all your purchase history. Therefore, their contact information, what they bought, when they bought it, did they actually use what they bought, did they come to the game? This tends to be that fundamental foundation for any other analysis. Your best leads tend to be the people that bought one ticket and now want to spend more money with you. But then you need to layer upon that with a lot more information. So then this collected data. This is information, like I said, coming from the staff. It could be coming from surveys. What are their favorite players? What's their favorite opponent? Who do they come to the game with? Stories, little tidbits that they share about themselves. This is data. This isn't just part of a sales process or a service process. This data can be very structured and used strategically. And then the last one here, which Phil did a great job pointing out, was the digital behavior. Are they visiting the website? Are they clicking on emails? Are they responding to your emails? That's collected data as well. Purchased data is interesting. This is data that you can actually just go out and buy. So if you have people's names and addresses, you can acquire a ton of information about people through Axiom or Experian. Those tend to be the two big data providers in sports, or in general in the US. You get demographics. For businesses, you can get firmographics. So rather than age and income, you get industry and number of employees and revenue. Personics and discretionary income, those are two more sophisticated data points. We're going to talk a little bit about personics in a couple of minutes. And finally, when you have all these three buckets, you can get into the fourth, which is your advanced analytics. That is taking all these different data points and building your own custom models, propensities. There's two providers I note there, Turnkey, Prospector, and Ticketmaster Live Analytics, that are the two that I've seen the most teams and organizations in sports work with. They're both great products. I've used them both. You can kind of pick for yourself. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into actual math or regression models or anything like that, so we're not going to spend a lot of time in the advanced section. But if you want to geek out with me later and talk about regression models and coefficients and all sorts of fun stuff, I'm game. So I want to pause for a second. Like I said, one of my professors is very important in emphasizing the WIFI, the what's in it for you. So I want an exercise. I want someone to throw out a data point. Could be from any of the buckets that we just discussed. And then let's think about what we can use with that data. What was that? Pet owners. Great. Pet ownership. Who's got an idea of what we can do with pet ownership? Come on, someone. There you go. Bring your dog to the game. Absolutely. Not only do you have bring your dog to the game, but now bring your dog to the game is sponsorable by a major pet chain. Or it can tie into community relations for an adoption initiative. And in order to know the feasibility of that, you need to know what percentage of your season ticket holders probably are pet owners. That can be done through a survey. That can be done through conversations. It could be a special group night that is an additional one-off sales opportunity. And that's one essential data point. Yes or no, do you have a pet? What's another one? Great one, distance from the stadium. All right, how do we look at distance from the stadium? Anyone? So I mean, on a basic level, so me as an analyst, that's going to be a big variable in my retention model. It's very typical. You see significant drop-offs as you progress from distance to the stadium. And it's not always the numbers you think of. The impact will vary a lot based on your city. So people in metro areas, even though it's only 10 miles from the stadium, that 10 miles could be an hour and a half. So you actually have to kind of look at the distance of the stadium a little bit more in terms of what your metro region looks like than just the number itself. But typically, teams want to stay within a 50 to 75 mile radius to really sell significant packages. Let's do one more. Anyone? Come on. Great one. How many tickets do they purchase through the secondary market? Now, secondary market data is very tricky because depending on what organization you work for, you might have you might have a lot of secondary market data, or you might have none at all. So if you have none at all, there are certain brokers, ticket resellers that actually, as part of agreements, will give some of that data back to you. Typically, Ticketmaster teams will get that data back through Ticket Exchange. But what you want to find out, you want to learn not just clearly, if someone buys multiple tickets, you'd think there'd be upsell, turn them into a partial plan or a full season ticket holder. And also, it's going to tell you a lot from the analyst side about how you're pricing your inventory. So that can potentially change. Maybe rather than just trying to upsell them, you're going to target specific clubs, specific premium packages. All right. So let's do a couple more examples here of just general data. Geography. You mentioned distance to the stadium. Fundamental idea is geography. I won't say what team this is, but you can see we're dealing here with the general San Francisco area. This is going to tell us a lot of information about density of people that bought a particular product in a particular area. This isn't just for me to put on a PowerPoint. This is for us to decide, are you going to get leads from one zip code or another? Are we going to do a direct mail campaign to a particular zip code? Are we going to let our sales rep, how often, raise your hand, how often do you actually get out of the office and kind of hit the road and go out selling face-to-face at events in the community? To me, it's a huge opportunity. So the more, especially depending on I know we have a mix of all different clubs here. If you're dealing with something that's a very local metro market, minor leagues teams, colleges, being able to know where to go out to find the people is going to be very, very important. I mentioned Personix clusters briefly. Personix is an interesting idea. It's an idea of creating a single data point to represent an entire individual. And this company, Axiom, came up with 70 different unique combinations of age and marital status and where you live and if you have kids and your income level, and they grouped them into these clusters. So rather than spending your time looking at 10 different data points, you can look at one and have a pretty good idea. Now, what this graph is showing you here is how likely someone is for this particular team to be in one cluster versus another. So all the numbers at the top are the ones that they're most likely to be in, which is good because clusters at the low end, numbers 1 through 10, tend to be the most affluent customers. But essentially, Personix clusters have these cute little names, Summit Estates, Sitting Pretty, Hard Chargers, but you can see they represent ages, marital status, kids. Once you get used to using a simple data point like this, it can tell you a lot about someone, and just letting you personalize that conversation just a little bit makes a huge difference. The robo-dialers that Phil was mentioning, those tools are great, but the offset in the volume of calls sometimes is by prepping for those calls. It's great that the tool will let you prioritize them with a number of calls, but you want to be able to personalize that conversation as much as you can. Once this level 1 approach, data appends, age, gender, discretionary income, this is really good. But then eventually you'll get sophisticated enough to get into what I call level 2. It's more of your lead scoring. Some teams do this themselves. They will take a look at the data. They will come up with their own models. They'll put the model information in front of their staff and use that to guide decisions on who you call and when you call. Like I mentioned, there's also third parties, things like Ticketmaster or Turnkey Prospector, that do a really great job of taking multiple data points and coming up with something that's unique for your club, your organization. So this is an example of a Turnkey Prospector chart for a team I will not name. So logically, 5 stars look really good. So as a sales rep, give me more of those 5 stars. They're closing at 2.3% as opposed to 0.8% or 0.4% if you look at the blue bar of my 4 and 5 star leads. Now this is also unfortunately one of the areas where the data can kind of bite you, because this is how many people we have that are 5 stars and 4 stars versus 1s, 2s, and 3s. The challenge here is it's not always just give me the best leads, like we mentioned the Glengarry leads. Sometimes it's how do we treat them differently and still make them all part of our sales process. We are still generating a significant amount of revenue from our 2-star and our 3-star leads. But maybe you don't call them 7 times. Maybe you call them once or twice, and you close out that opportunity a little earlier, but you make sure you hit that 3rd, 4th, or 5th follow-up over a 60-day window for your 5-star leads. So these are the things strategically that, as much as the data analysis is pointing out certain items, it's that feedback from the staff, it's that interaction between sales management and analytics to figure out how do we use this data more than just putting a data point on a customer record. It's got to become a part of our process and a part of our decision making. So let's do another group exercise. In this case, I want to talk a little bit about advanced models. So I just mentioned in that last example, we have the idea of 1 stars through 5 stars. I gave an example of you call the 5 stars more than the 1 stars. Pretty basic. Anyone have another idea? If I put a 5-star lead in front of you versus a 1-star lead, how would you act differently? Go for a bigger package. Excellent. That's definitely, and in fact, what some people will do will take that model and break it up into 2. So maybe you model propensity, which means how much they look like a fan, versus capacity, meaning how much you think they can spend. And maybe, especially if you see a 5 on both, you can go for a more expensive product.
Your voice quality may be different with the anticipated propensity of the
That's good. It's self-awareness, because the last thing you want to do, even if the 1s and 2s buy at a lower frequency, you don't want to artificially make that even lower by inadvertently treating them like a bad prospect. The reason why 1s, 2s, and 3s buck the model is because they could be the biggest fan in the world, and they're going above what they should be spending on entertainment, on sports, because they are that fan. And my model cannot capture that. I mean, we can get, depending on the data, you can get close, but there's always ways around that. So very good to not treat the other ones like less of a fan. Got one more? Something else to keep in mind when you're thinking about these scores? All right.
5 stars, no other 5 stars.
Oh, that's a good one. 5 stars, no other 5 stars. That's a good idea. And that's just something I think hopefully has come up in other sessions, the idea of referrals and the idea of using people's, whether it's through social, whether it's through relationships you're making with them during the sale. That is highly likely. All right. So the last point here on data, and I didn't want to spend too much time on the CRM side. I know you had a whole session earlier on about CRM. But if this data exists in a vacuum, what's the point? This is where you have to have that relationship between the analytics, the sales staff, and then where are you all living? And most likely you're probably all living in your CRM. If you have a CRM like Microsoft or Salesforce, if you work with us, Core, great. If you're using Arctics, that's fine. Arctics has got opportunities to store that data in the system, opportunities to track memos. So in this example here, this is a fake person. In this record, I would see their ticket history. I would see on the top right customer attributes. I'd see a couple of those Personix clusters, maybe a live analytics score. I would see that red to green bar in this case. The system's been customized to show you that likelihood to renew or likelihood to purchase on a color scale. And then if I go farther down, I'll see all the activity history. And that's where you get the rich data, the small data, the conversations, the things that add a lot of color to your conversation. And this next screen, I'm actually going to focus on the one on your left, the bigger screen. This is core specific. This is our activity logging screen. We've customized it a little bit from what you're probably used to seeing if you use a Salesforce or a Microsoft. In the middle section, rather than just having a big text box or like Arctic's memos where it's very open-ended, we have a lot of little structured data points. I mentioned earlier the idea of that one question, the renewal score, 1 to 5. That would be one of them. You could have favorite player in there. You could have reason for objection. Even before they say no, if they happen to say something that indicates the reason why they are not likely to buy, you can capture that data point. And this is where the feedback to the analytics team is huge, because they're hopefully monitoring these campaigns not just at the end, but they can monitor it in real time. And so if you start seeing patterns coming out of the analysis, the reason for objection on this campaign is a lot more to price than we've had in past campaigns. Maybe we're pricing our 11 game plans too high for the public. Maybe we want to look at something that's a different price point. Or if the objection is because of player decisions and your team makes a new acquisition, and you want to be able to instantly show me everyone who was close to buying, but their primary objection was because they were unhappy with the direction of the team, you can instantly re-engage with those people, but only if you have properly marked them in a way where you can easily find them in your system. So I wanted to leave a few minutes for questions. I'm actually making great time. Final thoughts, data is your friend. I know I exaggerate a little bit in the beginning, but hopefully you see that this is a very symbiotic relationship between the analytics and the sales. Point 2 here, garbage in, garbage out, which I call help your geeks. We can't do anything if you're putting in bad data, useless data. Its system is only going to be as good as the information feeding into it. And that's not just from the users of the system. That's also an organizational, philosophical decision. Teams have different budgets. Teams might spend a lot on data. Teams might not. If you've seen certain success, sometimes the voice of why we need a certain tool or a certain data point doesn't need to come from the data side. It can come from the sales side because they've seen it work elsewhere. So you can be an advocate for the things that you need to succeed in your organization. Give data a chance. This is a little pet peeve of mine, so I'll stand on my sandbox for a second. How many people, after making 10 or 15 calls, have said, these leads suck? Come on, raise your hands. OK. If your conversion rate for a particular audience is 2%, and then the conversion rate for a different audience is 5%, that's a difference in 3 calls out of 100. So if you're going to sit here and tell me after 10 or 15 calls that this audience sucks, give me a chance. Like, there is a reason behind why the particular audience was selected and given to you. So have a little bit of trust. That doesn't mean shut up and take it. That just means be a little patient. And be an active part of the process. Ask questions. Don't just say these leads suck. Say, hey, I'm noticing a difference. Why did you pick this audience? Help me learn a little bit more about what went into the selection, and maybe you'll understand that they take a little longer, but they're still going to be hopefully a high converting audience. Or maybe you're just not good with a particular audience. One of the things that I was always trying to do more is figure out not just what lead audience is the best, but what lead audience is the best for you. Because you might have great success selling to families that have kids. You're just crushing the family packages. Whereas over here, you might be doing all the great job with the premium sales because you're just doing real well with those high value clusters. So ask your staff about what audiences are working best for me. I think I know what they are, but they can actually go back and run the numbers. Data geeks love when you ask them questions. It shows you're putting a lot of thought into this. The last thing is data isn't everything. The last thing I want to do is say that we've measured everything, we forecasted everything. It really should be a balance, but hopefully the data side can help out a bit too. So here's my contact information, my Twitter as well. So please feel free to email, tweet. I think we've got 2 minutes for questions, if anyone has any. About CRM, data, anything. No?
What are some of the best ways to implement, really not just a CRM, but that kind of focus on whatever you're doing when it comes to sales?
The biggest thing you need is a project champion. You need someone in a management position who philosophically believes in it, who is willing to. There's always a little bit of investment. That investment could be in software. It could be in staff. It could be in time. If you have someone who's very traditional and is just focused on number of calls equals number of sales, and I just want to add headcount, that's often a real interesting way of deciding what someone's philosophy is. You give them a choice between 5 more sales reps or 1 database person and see what they say. So the biggest thing to get moving forward is management's philosophical buy-in into the impact data can have. All right, thank you for, oh, there we go.
So kind of adding to that, what's kind of your best hidden gem of kind of getting someone to buy into the CRM, kind of see the rest
Hidden gem. Commissions. Try to make it, what matters ultimately to everyone is what's in their back pocket, as much as, many people won't necessarily admit it. So finding stories or evidence that show that using these tools right can help you close a sale. At the Jets, we celebrated wins, and what I would always look for is not just celebrating the win from the sales tactic, but what went into it. We used to use a great example. This guy, Mike, was working on this small business for 12 months. Now, it's not the most efficient sale, but when he was able to tell the story of why he closed the sale, it was because of a little bit of the data that I had on getting the lead in his hands, but then all the other data that he had actually put into that account over the ways they use entertainment, their different their business goals for the year. And that information ultimately led not just to us sale, but led to a $50,000 club package sale, multi-year. So finding those stories, and then any other little tidbits, talking to peers at other organizations and find out why they got it, what were the efficiencies, what was the ROI. Everyone wants ROI, but it's not always as easy to calculate. The story I used to love from a team is through proper segmentation, engagement with their existing customers on CRM, they were able to take their entire audience and upgrade 20% of their ticket buyers from the upper bowl to the lower bowl. And that alone generated, I think it was like $15 million in 12 months. And so the cost of the CRM system's 50 grand, 100 grand, whatever that might be. And you've generated $15 million by using it properly. Cool.
Well, thank you,
guys.
Russell.
Appreciate it.